Welcome to the LBE VR panel. So by a show of hands, how many of you know what LBE is?
No.
That's pretty good, maybe 50%. So LBE is location-based entertainment, VR, virtual reality, of course. And we have an amazing panel. It's pretty exciting because you're really getting the real deal here, like you do at VRX, where it's the people really living and breathing and out there doing the good work in VR and really making businesses out of it. That's a super important element. So first I want to go through and have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll go through a couple of questions. And then you guys hopefully will have some time to ask some questions as well. So we have Bruce Vaughn, who is the CEO of Dreamscape. And we have Tim Martin, who's the CEO of, I almost had it memorized.
Fictional Force.
Fictional Force, doing simulators. And Jim Preston, who's the executive producer at Nomadic VR. Without further ado, I will let each of them introduce themselves and their companies, starting with Bruce.
Thank you. Bruce Vaughn, up until 2 years ago, for 25 years before that, I was at Walt Disney Imagineering. During that period, for 5 years, I led the R&D group, research and development group, and then the last 8 years, I was the chief creative executive overseeing all the global entertainment, culminating in Shanghai Disneyland. At that point, I turned 50, realized half my life was spent there, and decided that I'd done one of everything, and I should go out and see what is out in the world, and I was going to take 2 years off. And 4 months into that, I ran into a guy by the name of Kevin Wall, who is one of the founders, along with Walter Parks, of Dreamscape Immersive. They had just acquired the rights to a pretty impressive piece of software developed in Geneva by a group called Artanim, who are now Dreamscape Immersive Geneva. We have 12 PhDs in Geneva working on our software, which is really fun. They seduced me to be CEO. Mainly because when I saw their demo, it really answered 3 big questions I had about VR. I had worked in VR for quite a while, doing the early Disney stuff in 1992. We did Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride, Disney Quest, et cetera. What Dreamscape did is sort of in the Venn diagram of real estate, technology, and creative, and it's a location-based VR company, obviously. We will launch in 2018 in malls, taking advantage of the fact that malls need to bring people to them. What's great about that for us is that all the infrastructure's there. They already have footfall. We can take advantage of that. The technology is hardware agnostic. It's a piece of software, so we can continue to leverage what's being developed in the industry. And creatively, we're leaning deeply into the cinematic world. So we're going to be able to put in multiple venues. In our one retail location, we'll have up to 6 different venues. We'll be able to put 6 people at a time into a 10 to 12 minute experience that will allow you to have full body presence, so you are the interface, and not leaning into the first person shooter kind of world, but using game mechanics, cinema, and my experiences in the theme park world, creating immersive attractions and experiences, and really hope to sort of transform how people experience the incredible worlds in VR.
Oh, awesome.
Great. I'm Tim Martin. I represent Fictional Force. And our background, we create motion systems and motion experiences. So we bring VR and combine that and marry that with motion for a fully immersive experience. And sort of the nascence and background around that is in my previous life, I did a lot of work in video games. I worked in the video game industry for a number of years, and then toys. So I had a lot of experience in embedded device development and just basically creating fun stuff. My avocational interests include a lot of travel and extreme sports, and so I built up a strong network within that community, and that kind of created an interest in me to create a distributed location-based style experiences where I can help people experience what it could be like to do a wingsuit flight, or to drop a 50-foot wave or something like that. And so that interest kind of kept kind of burbling, and we thought, well, if we combine VR with motion, we can create these amazing, super immersive experiences and bring that to all sorts of different people. So that's how that all started. And so if I've got a number of collaborators in Europe that they have a much more fabulous lifestyle than I do. And every time I talk to them, they're in the Canary Islands, they're in Greece, they're in the Dolomites. It's disgusting. And so we sent them out custom IMUs and custom 360-degree cameras, and we started collecting data. We started collecting motion data, we started collecting video data, fusing that together and then trying that out. And our first experience when we got all this content and we got on the machine, we were at the warehouse, we thought, you know what, this is either gonna be super freaking awesome or it's gonna be a vomit comet. And we got on there and it was super freaking awesome. And everybody, every time we have investors, every time we have advisors, everybody who comes through, you have giant smiles on their faces, and that's the measure of whether you're doing something right. The only person who's ever gotten sick is my own brother, and so that's what family's for.
Yeah.
So obviously, real experiences of fusing 360-degree video with actual motion, these 9DOF motion detectors, was an aspect to it. But we also, we realized, because we wanted to create a mixed reality experience, we wanted to have a space battle where we took a FPV drone and flew it over San Francisco and added AR, or added CG elements to that. We thought this would be super awesome. It just happened that when we started that project, it was right before the rainiest winter San Francisco's had in like 5 years. And so we kept having to delay our FPV drone flights, kept having to delay them, and we're like, screw it, we'll just do it all CG. And so we created an amazing experience, all using Unity, which everybody uses Unity now, but Unreal is also super unreal and awesome. But we created a custom Unity plugin and pipeline also for getting content from the Unity engine onto our motion platforms and motion platforms in general, as well as custom modeling for the linear and rotations. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's off to.
My name is Jim Preston. I'm the executive producer at Nomadic. My background is in video games. I've been making video games for about 20 years. The majority of that was Electronic Arts. I was there most recently as a studio director before I tried the DK2, and I got the old-timey religion. I asked, when are we going to start making VR games at EA? And they gave me a year, something closer to a decade. So I said, well, I'll see you later. So I went out to startup land, and I tried this experience at Nomadic. We came out of stealth in March. So basically, we're very similar to Dreamscape in that we're a large-scale, warehouse-scale, fully tracked VR experience, but it's very tactile. It's highly tactile and fully walkable. So anything within a Nomadic experience is within arm's reach is going to be real. So that door is really there. The cabinet is really there. When you pull open the filing cabinet, that filing cabinet is a fully tracked object. You reach for the gun. That gun is really there. You walk across a real plank. There's a real elevator with a real vibrating floor. There's a real fan blowing real wind on you, and everything is built. And so for us, the goal is to be the promise of VR actually fully delivered. You really are in a virtual environment mapped onto a physical environment. So we too are targeting malls, cinemas, and family entertainment centers to be sort of large-scale VR attractions for neighborhoods everywhere.
Great. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. I'm a technologist. I've been doing that for more than 30 years, and kind of hardcore technology, a lot in the mobile space, but a love of Hollywood, love of films, always tracking, and always waiting to try and mix those together. And you know what? In 2015, that magically happened when I started working in VR, which was super fun because it is really this collision of the creative world and Hollywood and storytelling and the technology world, right? So, and it's, I'm an entrepreneur, so you've got the best of everything because it is a new industry, even though it's restarting again from the 90s. It really is new based on the capabilities of cell phones and all the technologies that have been enabled in the last 5+ years, right? So I work for a company called VRstudios. You probably know them better as VRcade. So we had something in the market several years ago, Time Zombies, 3 guys wanted to play Halo in a big courtyard and run around, and so that became what VRstudios is today, and all 3 of those guys are still with the company, but they got a little executive help and business help along the way, and that proved to be very useful because we have over 50 systems deployed in 15+ countries, and I've been with the company since 2015. It's the first company, the only company in the last 20 years that I wasn't a founding CTO or CEO of, and that's because it was really special, and it's completely, it's completely fun. If you listen to what we do for a living, I mean, it really is a fun world to work in entertainment, location-based entertainment, and to really try to, make people just have a great time. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of challenges with that, the business model not the least of which. So I'm going to go through and ask these guys a few questions. By the way, our systems are free roam. We had a 2-player, free roam wireless streamed VR system that we sold on the market in 2015. We've had 3 years of revenue. We, in July, announced a 40 by 68 player system, which is a backpack and Oculus. We have partners with everybody, hopefully a lot of people in this room, and we're looking for more, but our specialty is this software which helps to manage the systems called AMP, Attraction Management Platform. So it's pretty exciting. We're up in Seattle, flew down for this, and I'm super glad I did. So one of the first questions that I'd like to ask is, what's the big difference between home and, out of home? I, as a technologist, see the world completely disrupted by mobile phones. Had the pleasure of working in that space for many years, but that's really what's driving, the world to sit on their couch and to do things that they used to have to go someplace to do, right? So now they don't have to do that. Now they can, do it on their phone. So everything about location-based entertainment is all about getting someone off a couch and into the home. So, what are the differences beyond that you find? And just anything and everything could be business model.
I think there's a few things. I think the issue with home right now, and then this will get solved, is that you're alone, essentially, you're invisible, you're sort of disembodied usually, and it's difficult to create a shared experience. So when you're trying to dip into that space where you want to bring people together and go out and do things, currently now VR is very isolating compared to other forms of entertainment that you can do from your home. Again, I think that's all going to change, whether it be through MR or AR or even just better technology with VR. We see the location-based VR as the sort of the tip of the spear that's going to introduce compelling VR experiences to audiences, much like you used to have to, when I grew up, you used to have to go to the movie theater in order to see a film, and then when it went away, it went away. And then this period came when you could get a VHS tape and watch it at home and sort of transcend all that. We're in that very early nascent phase of, and you're right, it's been kicking around for a while, but this is the first time where I think the technology, the convergence of the technology, I think the fact that the offerings out of home are somewhat diminished. For film, which is struggling, AMC led our B round for a reason, going out to the movies isn't as compelling once the digital copy is as good as the copy you can see or the original, and you have great ways to sort of experience the digital copy in the palm of your hand or at home or anywhere. The reason to go out and spend money and do things with your friends to see a film kind of goes away. But I know from working at Disney, where people definitely go out and spend money, lots of it and often, there is a strong desire to go out and have shared experiences. So much like you said, our experiences are completely untethered. Like I said, you do have a full body, and it can be up to 6 people at a time, and it's a very collaborative, shared experience where we believe people are going to be drawn to go out and do this. It's also, I think, the important thing about location-based right now is typically even the longest experiences, it's sort of like the birth of film. The original films weren't 2 hours, they were very short. It's something you can sample. So you may have heard about it, you don't know if you're gonna like it, you may think it's primarily a tech, and I think the experiences in location-based will elevate it above the technology and become much more about experience, which is the most important thing. And it's not a big commitment. It's not like spending 2 hours in something. Literally in usually 8 to 12 minutes or maybe 15, 20, you can have a full experience. And so again, very small time commitment. And if you're like myself and Jim's company where we're gonna be in a place that you could go anyway, it's not a special destination. I'll go to the mall, I'm gonna have other things to do. I'm gonna eat lunch there, I'm gonna buy things there, whatever. So I think there's a lot of reason to believe that location-based VR will give people an opportunity to step into what, once you do a compelling experience in VR, I think it is one of those things that is almost addictive. It's something that you want to continue to do. It's because of the way you sort of take the nervous system hostage, and the kinds of experiences you can deliver are so unique that people experiencing the right experiences, I think it'll be something that they'll begin to want to experience again and again.
So yeah, so your question is the difference between home and location-based, and the big thing there is quality. It's always been quality. The shared aspect, what Bruce is talking about, is absolutely, definitely a huge component of it. Another component, which is important to us, is the quality of the experience, and the quality of the experience is partly is a good bit driven by the content. It's driven by the visual quality, and it's driven by any of the other things that aid in the immersion of the experience. So everybody up here is all giving people an experience that is a much more deeply immersive experience than you're gonna be able to get at home. And that's the whole nut of VR. The whole nut of VR is having something as deeply immersive as possible. And in a home-based environment, even Vive or the Oculus is awesome, and it's going to get you so far. It'll get you a pretty good visually immersive experience. But when you start wanting to bring in other things like haptics or motion, like we are, or more 3D sound that's just super immersive, the more layers of immersion you have on there, the more magical that VR experience is.
Right. I would agree with everything said, that the quality of VR LBEs will be better than what you really will ever be able to get at home. But in addition to the arguments just made, I would add, on the business side, out of home is different because of consumer expectation isn't clearly defined on the price point and the value of what's being delivered. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm from Electronic Arts. For those who are in the gaming space, followed in the news the Battlefront 2 the loot crate misstep on EA's part. And basically, it was a sort of a classic misstep of not understanding the consumer value. Consumer thinks they bought a premium-based product that is at a premium price point, which we have free-to-play mechanics in there. And there was a really negative audience reaction. The audience at home has been playing console games for 30 years. They have an expected value. And I think VR at home is also kind of swimming against that stream, as well as a lot of the content. It's just not, it's not even close to comparable of the sheer amount and quality of content you're getting from something like Horizons on PS4, which is a spectacular experience with 100 hours of gameplay. And you pay $25 on something in VR and you get 5 hours. So I think you also are competing against that. We don't have that out of home. The consumer doesn't know exactly even what this technology is. They don't know what these experiences are. So that's still kind of being defined, which is makes our lives a little bit easier because we can experiment with price point. We can sort of set the bar of what quality is and the value for that. I mean, there's certainly a floor there for consumers, but I think we've got a little more freedom there to experiment than I think the folks have at home.
Yeah, so when I think of all, I think we all agree. Some people might say quality, it needs to be high everywhere, and indeed you've had some really high quality consumer devices as well. But one thing that none of you mentioned was just the scale of things. So I know we've seen that, but in the case of really everybody, you know, you want people to have to get off their couch. You want to compel them to go somewhere. And so one great way to do that is to build something or deliver something that they just can't fit in their living room, right? I mean, you can't really fit a 40 by 60 8-player VR arena in your living room. I mean, it just isn't physically possible, and it's really never going to be physically possible. So that's a really awesome thing. Yes, some people eventually will have these in their basements, like they have incredible home theater units or, you know, swimming pools and tennis courts, but the majority of people won't. And so I think you'll see the bar of sort of combined layers of things being size, being added in, you know, components, whether it's haptics or whether it's, you know, we did Halloween Horror Nights. That was my personal project led at Universal Studios a year ago, September, and that was incredible. You know, we had 4D effects. We had live actors, you know, that were in the experience, but they were, you know, manning props. You can't do that at home. You can't just have some guy show up and like interact with you in your experience. That's what it takes to do something that is not, you know, replicable in the home. And you'll see everybody that's in this space necessarily drive to that place. And yeah, it goes without saying it has to be high quality, it has to be. And there is a lot of experimentation. We've been fortunate that we've had revenue and have deployed systems, so we've had a lot of learning, and you know, it's really early, and there's a lot of hopefully failing fast and iterating and improving, but it's really here to stay in the entertainment world, in the location-based world, because they necessarily have to iterate. I mean, it's a life or death situation, and even if a company's so conservative they don't want to, they'll be forced to because their competitors will be doing that. So, you know, this is, you know, genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back, and we're at these very early stages with VR, but it's going to be, you know, AR, complement, transmedia, streaming, eSport. I mean, it has a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of really fun stuff that can be done in this space. So, you know, a question that I heard at a lot of conferences, including this one last year when I was doing a fireside chat, which is, how do you make money? You know, like that's always the question in VR, and it's always the struggle, you know, for a lot of vendors. So in this LBE ecosystem, it's complicated. I mean, one thing, I love a good problem, you know, and VR it's complex, right? Like technologically complex, it's also complex from a business ecosystem side. You have IP holders if you're gonna, you know, license something for a great experience, and that brings in the crowd. You have the developers of the game, you have the hardware manufacturers, you have the solutions providers, and then you have the operators themselves. And you may also have the real estate, you know, the mall owners or the space owners. And you can bet every single one of those businesses needs to make money in order to make this a sustainable business. So what is your view about, you know, how do we make money? How does this ecosystem all make money, and is that possible?
Yeah, well, definitely think it's possible. Better be.
That's good. Good answer.
A lot of time. So I think there's a few components. First step is going to be the end-to-end, what at Disney we always say the guest, but the consumer experience. So the end-to-end consumer experience is going to be super important. And at Dreamscape, we're absolutely focusing on, from the moment wherever you happen to be able to become aware of us, and then you know, make a reservation or buy a ticket. It begins there, and then how you're treated throughout the entire experience. And we're going to have a lounge area that's going to have pre and post activities, all reinforcing, you know, food and beverage, things like this, that all reinforces the fact that you're going on these fantastic journeys. Again, we'll have multiple theaters with multiple titles playing. I think flexibility is super important, at least for us. We're looking at keeping our, what I'll call theater spaces, where 6 people go in at a time and have these experiences, free roaming. We're keeping them very flexible. We're being very clever, I think, with how we're doing haptics. So in one theater, we can have different titles for different times of day for flexibility. Ultimately, all that points towards building a relationship with the consumer and building loyalty. We're doing serialized content. Our intent is to have Dreamscape, since we're building the venue, we're creating the content, we're, you know, creating the business models, everything. It's an opportunity to have Dreamscape stand for a certain type of experience. We're really want to have a very broad market where when we test, we test from like 13 to 70. And we're doing serialized content, really pushing towards a sort of subscription model for people, loyalty program. And then the last piece is developing your own IP, I think is super important. Because it can then, even though there's a bit of a myth of transmedia as far as you can't just easily lift things and move them from one place to another, but I know from Disney, obviously, IP machine, we can take the movies, we can make theme park and live attractions out of them, or you can take a Pirates of the Caribbean and make a huge movie franchise and games and et cetera out of that stuff. So you absolutely have the same ability to do it in VR.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so right now, I think the tricky thing for us is to make sure, right now, what's happening is VR experiences are being translated into cost per minute. So $1 per minute for, sub-$1 per minute for a very simple experience, $1 per minute for something in the middle, and then $2 for the absolute premium. And having that kind of model is something we definitely want to try and make sure we can get away from. And we also don't want to fall into the same trap of having an expectation set by a different industry and have that imposed on us in our industry, and that is the movie industry. So if there's a perception of value in the Midwest that you're going to go to get a $9 ticket for a movie, or here $12 to $15 ticket, and that's a 2-hour experience, you don't want that formula, and you really want to. That's why the quality and the uniqueness of the experience and that value, that is what you really want to try and sell. So for us, can we make money? Absolutely, for sure. I mean, definitely. And our model is quite a bit simpler because we're a systems provider. So, the location-based arcades, they want to get their payoff in 12 to 16 months. You show them the costs, you show them conservative models of how much they would make based on traffic, it pencils out real nice. It's super simple for us.
Awesome.
But I think the thing is, stay away from those
Totally agree.
models.
Jim?
Yeah, I would add only that there, within sort of the area that we're targeting, there's really two main. There's a franchising model, or there's a rev share model. So it's very similar to what's been going on in decades at arcades and family entertainment centers. So a lot of arcades are just used to sort of buying something and then running it themselves. There are a couple of location-based companies that are in sort of that franchise model. That's one way to go. We personally have decided at Nomadic to go with a rev share model because we want to completely align the interests of the developer with the venue partner with us. We're the ones that take the revenue, and then we do the payout to the venue partners and to the IP partners. We're a little bit different from Dreamscape in that we are a platform. We don't make any content ourselves. We don't want the developers to feel like we're competing with them at all. We work closely with them from a development perspective. We have creative teams on our side. We're the guys who put the fans up in a certain place and warp the board, 3D print the props that have the former prop master from ILM that works for us. So we are very much sort of a platform route, and we are very much game focused. So in terms of monetization, while I don't want to get into specifics right now, I would say that the macro trends that you're seeing in games, moving to games as a service, that you're likely to see those show up in Nomadic experiences down the road, where it's not around completely revving entirely new content on a 90-day basis, but it's taking an existing piece of content, extending it out, and extending the relationship to the individual customer across a long life cycle around a title or series of titles.
Yeah.
And I think the last piece of that I just want to say, the reason to build that relationship is data. You look at the biggest companies in the world, and basically the most valuable thing they have is data. In VR, you can really, acquire a lot of data on what people like, prefer, how much time they spend looking at things, all this kind of stuff. So it's a pretty interesting part of the puzzle.
That's a huge part of our puzzle, a huge part.
Analytics is definitely, we're just at the very beginning. We've sold systems and solutions. We've seen the business models change. It's definitely migrating to a rev share model. And, if you think of the industries, we sell into family and entertainment centers, theme parks, movie theaters, and casinos. And each of those industries is different, but they all have a compelling reason to want to have location-based VR. And there is, you can craft it such that there's a return on investment. In fact, that's what we've focused on. So for LBE guys, it drives you to throughput. You have to pay a lot of attention about how many people go through, what the ticket price is, how long does it take to get suited up and to suit down and to clean everything in between, and for them to be able to understand how to play the game, right? So it's a very complicated equation, but I think none of us would be sitting here if there wasn't a real opportunity to make money and to have this be an exciting business. And it really is at this point. I'm going to do a couple of sort of flash questions, so kind of short answers. 2 questions. The first one is, why is it that you will be successful?
I think we'll be successful because we're leaning into the high quality creative, the storytelling aspect of it, and the shared experience side of it. And I think we're going to end up building very strong relationships and franchises through what we do.
Phil, how about you?
We're concentrating our core competency, and we're not getting mired down in things that we aren't going to be great at. We're going to help people who are great at things, so content producers, people that are really good at that, which can be super expensive and highly risky. We're going to let them come to us, and we help get that stuff on there. We're great at technology. We're great at experiences. That's where our core competency is, and we create a level of experience that's far better than the competitors.
Jim?
Yeah, I think very similar to what these guys have said. I think we're going to be successful because right now we address a real problem in the market, and that's the softening of retail and cinema. And they're looking for ways that dollar translates over from actual purchasing dollars to food and beverage and entertainment dollars. They're looking for ways to take existing spaces and generate more revenue per square foot, and we just solve that big problem. And we're highly modular, so it's Lego-like in the terms of the construction of the interior. So switch out content on an almost hourly basis. We can launch to several locations, get folks trained and operated up and running. So I think that unlike trying to create, some VR companies are trying to create a desire in people who might not have the desire yet for VR. It's actually, we're all trying to do something which is address a real problem that's really in the market right now.
Yep.
And I think that's why LBEs gets a lot of people so excited.
Yeah, so I think we're going to be successful because we bend over backwards to really try and accommodate the customer and to make them successful and to make their customers happy. And you can look at any business, any industry, anywhere, and it always eventually comes down to customer service. And that is the most important element of any business. And I'm sure you guys are all focused on that. And it is really true that this driver on the digital disruption is helping create a need. So that's awesome. Okay, your predictions for 2018. What's going to happen in LBE in 2018?
I think that it will be, I do think it's the year that you're going to see big adoption. I think there's so many companies going out there and launching finally, I think, really quality experiences. I do think there's a curiosity around it. You can't really go anywhere without hearing something about VR. And I think on a pop culture side, if Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One is it all good, halfway good, it's going to be like the starting gun because if he hits it right, he has a way of sort of influencing what's on people's minds, and I think that could also be a big component.
Yep, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to start seeing a lot of LBEs popping up. I mean, IMAX, AMC, all these guys, movie theaters had a really crappy year. They got great real estate, and they want to fill seats and put butts in seats. You're going to start seeing a lot of repurposing, and you're going to see those things popping up. Same with retail, with malls. So I think you're going to actually start seeing this stuff because the big players are putting money into these guys, and these guys are going to kick ass. They're going to put some nice experiences out there.
Jim?
Yeah, we're going to kick ass. That's the global strategy.
Kick ass.
We're also going to crush it. I agree. It's going to be surprising flowering of location-based up and down the spectrum from small egg-like pods to those of us that do large warehouse scale tracking. I think you're going to see 4 or 5 major developers operationalize through 2018. So there are a couple of major players that are already out there doing a great job they're running a handful of locations. But 2018 is going to be very much around really kind of learning our business. I think you see the major platform providers who have been, with Vive as an obvious exception, but who have been somewhat standoffish to location-based. I think you see more strategic partnerships and relationships formed with folks that are doing home-based VR. And I think you see VR really started to take off in the popular consciousness as places, the Des Moines, and the Tallahassees, and the Biloxi's in place that aren't on the coast, who have no idea, have never done VR before. We've had VP of malls come in, and VPs have never done VR before.
Yeah.
You kind of forget how out here in the Bay or on the West Coast, you're in just a completely different world. I think people for the first time, they're gonna try VR, and the LBE stuff, as I mentioned, I think is the best version of VR.
Yep.
So I think a lot of the pressure that you see of like, it's really expensive, they really don't know what they're gonna get, they're not gonna buy $800 for this thing, what the hell is this thing? They're gonna try it in location-based, they're gonna have the best experience they've ever had, and then they'll go, maybe we do need one of these for home.
Yeah, so 2018, I think, rather than the US dotted, you will see VR location-based experiences pretty much in every medium and large city in the US for sure by the end of the year. I mean, I think that no one we're involved in a lot of projects where things are being planned and funded, so it's going to be out there in a big way. So it's going to be a really, really big year for LBE VR, which will help to push the whole VR industry forward. A lot of the home guys are strategically investing in location-based to then, seed the uptick of consumer. So I want to thank, this panel. It's an amazing panel and really smart guys doing really amazing things, and will contribute to driving the industry forward for sure. We have like the couple minutes. Is there a question? Anybody? Yeah.
About for these 40 by 60 boxes you talked about.
Yep.
What is the potential number of locations in the U.S. do you think that can justify this on financial?
The large arena scale systems, the one like I refer to, which was 40 by 60, you'd be surprised how many locations can tolerate such a thing and how much. Well, enough to make our business model successful. I mean, I would say you're into thousands, maybe tens of thousands. I mean, they're pretty big numbers. And then when you start looking at the
Just
the
take
cost
cinema.
of those systems and then the ongoing, update of software and so
So a
forth.
lot of the cinema providers have built way too many screens.
Yeah.
And
that's-
they just lie fallow,
that's
and
a very
they're
good
willing to just rip out the seats on these, and they can easily support 2,000 square feet. So
Yep.
the number of, Bruce, you're probably more informed about this than I am, but we really are talking about the several thousand cinemas, each of which
Yes.
have screens. And those screens aren't actually generating a lot of revenue. So when we talk to cinema providers, our installation alone in a year, 3 or 4x the revenue potential of that screen.
Yeah.
And then there's malls who have also overexpanded, and then there's family entertainment centers, and that's North America. And now you just look at Asia, and it's Jupiter compared to Earth, what's going on over there. So
Asia has tens of thousands.
Yeah, that number I said was I'm talking about just the U.S. So I mean, it's a global market. In fact, the rest of the world moved faster than the U.S. on this. But it's a big business actually. And,
Even the small-
anybody that owns property is trying to have an experience in their location where they can
another
bring
big,
people in and make money.
Anchor boxes that have, that are now empty too. So space.
Even the small players are making money. Even somebody in Madison, Wisconsin, who's putting some Vives in. The dudes,
Yeah.
those guys are making money.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Would you be targeting the larger city first, or just East Coast, West Coast, or what's the plan?
Well, you already see experiences in the larger cities, but typically it's, larger cities and larger companies that have spaces, but really we're seeing them everywhere. I mean, every little city, everywhere. I mean, everywhere. I mean, honestly, it's surprising to me the places that put in VR. It's surprising to me how many, regional family entertainment centers there are. And, if you think of every bowling alley, every movie theater, every casino, every, shopping mall. I mean, there's just so many locations that are looking to, recover from the disaster that is, kind of the retail
And there's really
situation.
two strategies for us. One is, there's obviously high tourism locations. So if you can get something in Times Square or whatever, you don't need to worry about repeat because you get enough volume of new people coming through all the time who are in a mood to try something new, to spend some money. Then the other DMAs we're looking at are, high quality malls, because we're not looking to put deck chairs on sinking ships, but high quality malls that are actually doing well, that have high repeat and loyalty. where people go often and again, can afford it.
And it depends on the price, so if you're a
Yeah.
high-end experience, so, a smaller town might support smaller installations. There's a wide continuum of location-based VR products that are on the market. So, the super large, super, expensive sort of theme park model, you're going to see where you have an embedded base where the theme parks are, and they're there for a reason, right? Anybody else? One more question?
Yeah, Nicole Zaro from Zio Design again, and Follow the White Rabbit. So cache is, content is king, and with these experiences, I was curious, businesses work when value is exchanged, between the installation and the customer. Was curious what you've seen to date in terms of content or types of experiences that drive, that best drive, location-based experiences that really put butts in seats, if you will.
Big IPs, so brand names that people know today are really, really important. But, if you look at all of the
Burger
technologies that
King or Call of Duty, what do you mean?
well,
Goes with-
movie
Right word.
IPs, anything that there's an emotional affinity to, really, that can be experienced really incredibly in VR is going to get people off their couch. But there's an interesting thing about creating your own IP. If you look at what happened when mobile platform allowed games, the first thing that happens is everybody takes existing IPs and then they translate it to that new platform. But eventually, native new IPs emerge and become multi-billion-dollar businesses. Candy Crush, Angry Birds, those ring a bell, right? So we're kind of in that early stage with VR where we're adapting existing IPs, but there's going to be some amazing new IPs that become brands. And I think this guy next to me is probably going to be, driving at least one of those with his background. But that's pretty exciting, and that's the road we're on. Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, the quality of the content, really, we keep saying that, but if you look at some of the early providers of VR experiences, the content's really bad, really, really bad. And you will not get recidivism. But if you've got a very good high quality experience, you'll get not only people coming back, but then it'll come more. The IP helps because that gets people through the door. But just VR alone is novel enough that if VR experience, oh, that's cool, and you've got really good content, so you definitely get the return on your value if you concentrate on content. It's only 6 minutes, so you can crank,
Yeah, and we're so we sort of there's the obvious ride the long tail of a movie that's coming out, and you can open with that, even though that's the least of what we're doing. Because we have Walter Parks, as one of our founders and very active. Walter wrote War Games and Sneakers and produced over 50 movies. He and his wife ran DreamWorks for the first 14 years, Gladiator, Minority Report, Men in Black, all that kind of stuff. He has an amazing Rolodex, so we're working with some of the best directors and musicians in the world. And so it'll be branded, so-and-so presents. I can't announce anything today, but so-and-so presents, so-and-so presents, yeah. A kind of experience. It doesn't need to it can be a completely new piece of IP. And then there's obviously Evergreen Franchises, The Void, Star Wars, things like Harry Potter, et cetera, or big companies like Nickelodeon, et cetera, that stand for something that will draw people out. And I think that is important in the beginning. But I do think, to just rely solely on IP that has existed in another medium won't allow us to really leverage the uniqueness of this medium. There's certain stories that are best told first here. And if but it is foolish to think that you're, going to really get a lot of draw if you don't have something that, so-and-so presents, if it's a big name, would be pretty compelling.
Well, join me in thanking the panel, and thank you all for your attention. It's fabulous.
Thank you.